y'all. You are listening to Chain Reaction. I am your host, Jeremiah Mitchell, joined today by Mr. Jeremiah Harding. How are you doing, sir? Good to see your face.
I'm reasonable. You?
Doing pretty well. Been just a busy weekend for a lot of reasons. Finally got around to putting a house on Craigslist, which it was the wrong weekend to do it because my texts are just completely full of responses for a house for rent, and my email is full. It's really annoying, which makes me think I probably should have put a little bit more money per month on there, weed out some of the riffraff. But I don't know. I've in the past I've historically rented out to people I know, other than one occasion. So I always drop it down a little bit for them because it's kind of nice if I can make a little money and they can have a little bit cheaper rent, and we get to have a decent, relationship in that landlord lessee type thing. That has its own things that I enjoy about it, especially being able to do it with family a little bit. That's been super helpful for them. So.
Well, if you want to weed out the riffraff, just tell them that they'll be supporting Christian anarcho-capitalism.
Yeah. You want a relatively small group of people to pick from. You don't want no group of people to pick from. so I'd like to keep it, somewhere in between what I have now, which is far too many, and also I've rented homes for really cheap before, but on average, the renters that you get when they are on the cheaper side of things can be a little scary in terms of evictions and leaving stuff in the yard and not taking care of the sidewalk and all that sort of thing. Anyway, but that's been busy. So hauling last minute garbage out of there and doing showings and stuff. And my son had a birthday party yesterday, which made me happy.
Happy birthday to him.
Yeah, thank you. We had to do our pre-event house cleaning, as opposed to just leaving it be the mess that it has been for the last year, we'll say. But it's overall a good weekend. Had a blast at the party. Got to see some people I don't see very often. I'm sure he'll remember it forever. Best days of his life. He was kind of happier when people left, I think. Got to just hang out, chill, laugh. He didn't have such an audience while eating.
He's like the new kid, right? Like he's very young.
1-year-old, yeah.
Yeah, so he's not gonna like people for a while.
Yeah, he likes people all right, but he tries to figure people out a little bit.
Yeah,
like there's
well, that's good.
Yeah, there's just a period where it's acquiring comfort takes a little time. There are a lot of people there that he doesn't see very often, so that's a little.
Somebody at the door?
Difficult. Yes, somebody is at the door. No, I don't know who they are or why. They might be. But seriously, like they could see through this window at me recording. They wanted to. They're right by it. What was I gonna say? Oh, yeah, it was kind of interesting. It's so funny being an anarchist in just normal, everyday, even minor political conversations.
Mm-hmm.
We had my wife's dad's longtime girlfriend was here, and I've met her like 4 times. My wife never sees her dad really, but once a year and a half or so. And we got to talking about something, and we were talking about, we're very much in agreement about how bad it was that big business was in this constant collusion with the state in order to prevent the smaller guy from competing, and the way Cargill, Monsanto, or in using tons of pesticides and getting away with it, and all this IP law stuff that ends up really potentially hurting small farmers that get ridiculous lawsuits against them due to these companies trying to enforce IP laws from their accidentally fertilizing some other farmer's crops that wasn't using their seed. Stuff like that. We're in mutual agreement. So I think from that, she then assumed, oh, he must be a Democrat, which is Look, I don't know that I'm closer to a Republican or a Democrat, as I'm very far from both in so many ways, but I've always kind of thought I'm probably closer to a Republican just because I grew up that way. That doesn't mean I am. That's just where the transition happened. But it's funny to get in this conversation. You know, she talked about how she loved Bernie. I'm like, oh, Bernie's horrible. And when you say it, she didn't. Like, it's just this person you don't really know at this party, and I I'm in a lot less social situations now. Being a parent, my life is a little bit hermitized, we'll say. So it's sometimes yeah, it's been a few weeks since I had one of these, and some of them just kind of strike me. I forget people's response and the looks on their faces when you tell them stuff. Oh no, Bernie wants power to the people. I'm like, no, he doesn't. Bernie's anti-freedom, more anti-freedom than anyone. No, Bernie wants. I'm like, okay, tell me one policy that Bernie Sanders has that is pro-freedom. And she brought up universal health care. Which just leads to your typical anarchist argument, which everyone has heard, or at least there's a lot of really good ones against state-run health care.
So let me get
But
this straight, miss. You think that it's terrible when government colludes with the military and the manufacturing industries and the food service industries and the agriculture industries and pharma, but then suddenly once they get in bed with healthcare, that's going to make that industry improve totally, and it's going to be great for the common man, and everything's
yeah,
going to be stellar.
yeah, they in all these situations they think that the problem is big businesses causing corrupt politicians, when the problem is this subsidized infrastructure of coercion that big businesses can take advantage of because human nature is what it is. There's enough greedy people out there, enough manipulative people out there to get power for self gain when you have the state in existence. Like, it's just a failure to identify what the issue is, and this ridiculous notion that is so foundational, I think, to a lot of people's thinking that they don't even realize is foundational. But this idea that the state is them and they are the state. It is one of the most insidious subterranean foundations for thinking present in our modern world. And I think one of the most important things to destroy, because then you think power to the state, power to me, and power to my neighbor. When,
As long as they do what I want, everything will be great.
yeah. It was just, I ended up like, I had to go in the kitchen and do something. So I rattled off as fast as I can an explanation of how all these, how universal healthcare would be funded and taxation is murder back theft. And she goes, oh, that's interesting. And then I was like, I had to go in the kitchen and make coffee or something with my boy or something like that. It's a funny way to end a conversation. You're like, and you just, yeah, this lady has never heard this before. She's never heard this, and she has no idea. Which is, it's sad, but it's nice to be able to at least throw some ideas in people's minds, even if you kind of shove them in their face a little bit. At least it's there.
Well, yeah, I mean, the exposure to different perspectives is precisely what the elites don't want, unless it's on a platform like, social media, where not only can they control what information is proliferated, how much, but the information is in such an overload and a barrage that it's not coming from a single source, and you can't get that single source's full side of the story before you realize that it's not what you wanted to hear and block them. So the whole, I'm a pedestrian. I don't have a car. The last car I had, I oversped in and under maintained, and it fucked up, and it was my fault. And I feel stupid about it every time I think about it, so I probably won't have that mistake again when I get my next car. But
It's an important lesson.
yeah. But beyond that, I'm a pedestrian, and it means that I have to be on the ground level with people a lot more than I used to. And the whole idea of anarchy, specifically the fact that there are many types of it, is alien to people. It's fucking alien to people. I'm in a conversation right now on Twitter, um, with people, and I just sort of jumped in while I was waiting to start this recording
Okay.
because these people are
Show prep
affiliated
Twitter.
with, yeah, well, these people are affiliated with this person who I had a series of negative interactions with that I just thought was laughable. And so I made a joke, and it led to this conversation lasting a while. And one of them is bringing up Riolu, I think that's how you would pronounce the name, is bringing up the social contract as a way to break my statement. They say literally that those two words break this idea. I said to him, I think it's her. They, I don't know. I'm assuming gender. I probably shouldn't do that.
Yeah, fuck you
They,
for doing that.
yeah, right. They say that those two words break this statement because they wanted me to sort of like give a really quick analysis of why cops can't be honest in the way that they were saying they were. Um, and so I said, okay, here's the skinny, just not going to sound nice. Taxation is theft, government is slavery, no constitution can legitimize either, and consent of the governed is a joke of an ethical stance that would work hardly anywhere else. Cops enforce all this, so all cops are bastards. See? Mean. And they say that the two words social contract break that. And it's so easy to disprove the social contract
Two
because
words,
I
made
didn't.
up abstraction in order to justify the worst kind of human behavior.
Oh
Yep.
shit, that was more than
Great
two
argument.
words.
Oh, it's just
But
such a
yeah,
stupid concept.
yeah. I didn't like fucking four words. Disprove your two words. I didn't sign shit. But they would probably bring up the fact that like I've been in a vehicle that's been on wheels, that's been on a road. And so that's probably like the extent of their sort of thinking there, that because I've used these things at any point, they're okay to exist in the first place in the way that they do. And that's just such absurd low level thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not fundamentally different than saying that because a slave eats his master's food, then his slavery is justified. His slavery is consensual. If he
Hmm.
didn't want to be a slave, then, if he didn't consent to this, then he shouldn't take anything from the master.
Right.
Not slavery if you're getting something in return for it, obviously. I mean, if you get all these beautiful, wonderful roads, which kill 30,000 people every year, kind of at a minimum, I think that's on the low end, then you must have consented to having this money taken from you in order to pay many overpriced fees for these roads, and that are an incredibly inefficient way of travel.
Yeah.
Do
Or
it.
safe food or clean water or education, because that's what school is. It's
Clean
definitely education.
Yeah, Flint, Michigan. Clean
Yeah.
water.
For everyone. I mean, except the people that have poor representatives who don't actually represent them to begin with, which sort of disproves the idea that government is default representative, but whatever. That's just minor details.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all really silly when analyzed honestly and consistently. When you actually have some undergirding principles that that are behind your analysis, that are foundational. And if you if you lived your life or lived in other relationships using the same types of principles that people attempt to use in order to justify the existence of the state, one, it's completely unworkable, and two, you'd probably be killed or locked in a cage. They simply don't work with reality. They don't line up with reality, and no one lives that way or thinks that way in their day-to-day lives, in their or not no one, but almost no one in their everyday relationships. Like,
Well, I made you dinner, bitch, so you should definitely do what I say. You ate the food, right?
yeah, yeah. This sex is now consensual. It's perfectly rational in the statist worldview. It follows A follows from B, or B follows from A rather. But A is so fucked up that it doesn't work as a principle for human ethics, or as a a way to determine whether or not consent has occurred. This idea of the social contract just fits that perfectly. You can't just make up a contract out of thin air and then make up terms based on absurd ideas, terms of the contract that others must follow implicitly based upon their actions that are simply them going about their everyday lives, looking to survive and respecting the property rights of others. But it's been used so frequently. It's one of those things that's just been pounded into people's heads over and over and over again. It's a contract. It's a contract. It's a contract. So this justifies the state. This justifies the state. And people are prone to believing repetition, especially when it's been in their heads since being a child. That's one of the biggest things. You get in their brain with these manipulative phrases and these deceptions, and not necessarily even thought of as deceptive by the people giving them to their kids. You get it into their brains when their brains are really plastic and really good at learning, like my boys will be for the next 5 years especially, but even 10 years, when he's just ready to intake things and integrate things into his worldview and learn and form a way of thinking that makes sense of the world. So if I feed him absolute nonsensical garbage and then his brain hardens, like I was fed when I was a kid, and like most people are fed when they are a kid, then it's tougher to remove that garbage and reshape one's worldview when they get older, as we
Which is
find
why, of
repeatedly.
course, they want a K-12 education system, because once you're past 12, the only thing that's left to do is point you in a direction with all the useless crap they put in your brain and tell you that if you don't go in one of these directions and get this shiny piece of paper that proves that you can, you're not going to have a life.
Yeah, and it gives them more tax cows. When
Yep.
when you break apart the family by mandating state education, or mandating various types of education, you incentivize the man or the woman going to work full time as well, because you're sending your kids to what is essentially a daycare.
Prison camp.
Yeah, for the parents in their way of thinking, the daycare. That's what I was about to try to clarify that. So it's like a free daycare, or a daycare that they're forced to pay for, rather. So if you're forced to pay for a daycare, well, you might as well go to work then, make more money, so that your family can get ahead and have more
Well, so that
stuff,
you can
or
buy
a
your
quote
kid
unquote
that
better
useless
life.
tchotchke.
Right? Yeah, you can buy your kid video games so he can do something to relieve himself of the prison his mind's been in for 7 hours a day, 5 days a week. To
Yeah, or
try to escape and do something to release his mind a little.
or
Right.
more insidiously, the fact that if your kid is fed all this shit during the day, and you can also feed them a similar message and reward them for it with invisible things in a video game form. If you can feed them this message of obedience, if you can feed them this message of do what we say and everything will be roses, then you give them a video game that's also keyed into that. And when they rebel later on in life, the only thing that they'll be rebelling within is the constraints that you've put their brain in. So they'll think that anything without that is, somehow radical, even if it's falling exactly in line with the way that they wanted you to think. Because if you can constrain somebody's options, then they'll think that everything on the fringes of those options is more approaching freedom, when it could even be more enslavement wrote out by the same sorts of mindsets and paradigms. So like we have a world of false choices, and you know it's all built around giving kids false choices and telling them that if they don't respect these as the choices, that they're part of the systemic problem. And that's why you've got to have these schools that hammer them into shape and say that if they think in a different way, that they're the problem, because otherwise they're not parenting your kids effectively, and you would have to do that yourself. And when you started to parent your own kids, you might realize that this hands-off approach has turned your kid into a little slave for somebody else and removed their love for you entirely. This destruction of the family so that the state can replace them as parents is what the elites have wanted for years.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the video games false reward thing. Just a funny because I think I've always been a little bit for whatever reason, less inclined than average to think about these things or to be motivated by letters or numbers. Like grades did not mean very much at all, really. You just kind of do it. When there was certain times in middle school and stuff where I got paid varying amounts for certain letters, so I cared then. But that's a different sort of motivation. But my brother was talking about video games. We have a Thanksgiving and Christmas tradition where we stay up till 4:30 a.m. playing some sort of video game on those particular holidays. I don't know how that developed, but it's just kind of one of the things we like doing together. And he's like, "Do you want to play some crappy games with me?" I'm like, "I don't think so." Why do you want to play crappy games? It's because his gamer score is really low for Xbox Live or whatever. And if you play more games, it's easier to get your gamer score up higher. And I'm like, so why do you want to get your gamer score up higher? Is there, you get a reward or something? He's like, no. He just likes seeing the number get higher on the gamer score. This is fascinating. It was a fascinating difference between
Well,
him and I. It's super confusing to me, but it's re- related to what you said. And I really heard people talk that honestly about desiring a gamer score before.
yeah, well, it's because if he has a higher gamer score, he can then go to school the next day and say, my gamer score is now 3,000, instead of saying my gamer score is, 2,986, like the schlub he would be.
But he won't. He's like 28 years old, 29 years old, with a kid of his own. He's just
oh,
yeah. He's just like, I just wanted to get a little higher. I don't know how old he is. I can't remember. He's not 29, 28, 27. He just turned 28. That's a very important piece of information for our listeners to know. So it's a good thing I got the correct number out there. But yeah, he's got a 3-month-old. I just wants a gamer score higher, and he's a fairly reasonable person as far as people go. Yeah, I don't know. Random. Okay, Veterans Day was yesterday. You cool with jumping to that?
yeah, sure.
All right. I had nothing more to say. I can only talk about gamer scores.
Well, I mean, if any of y'all are on Steam, I'm Insanity is free over there. So I just got a couple of achievements on Sonic Forces.
Congratulations. Wait, I hope.
Yeah, there we go.
I hope you feel really good on the inside, and I hope that motivates you to play more video games in your life. Be just
probably not
passive person. Yeah, I don't. All right.
I'm getting nice props from my avatar though. My OC Rav the Wolf. I'm getting some new clothing articles for him every time I do well. So that's their form of incentive.
Excellent. Your computer avatar is going to look amazing.
It already sort of does. It's got like shit kicker boots and NCAP gloves.
Yes. All right. Electronic motivations are hilarious. I understand them, but it's just a weird world that we live Or what
Yeah.
do you want to say about Veterans Day? We did a little pre-show discussion, and Harding said, "Let's talk about Veterans Day because fuck Veterans Day," and
Yes.
that was the extent of his rant and reasoning. Is
Well, I
that
mean,
it? Anything else you want to say? Get a little more specific. I mean, this is 45-minute hour long podcast. You
yeah.
can say
Well,
fuck a lot of things. That's fine.
well, okay. So my idea of Veterans Day can pretty much be summed up in a shirt I just made for Teespring, which is available for $15 at base price. So if any of y'all wanted to support me specifically, that's a way you could do it. But it says Veterans Day, cheerleading the military industrial complex since 1938. And that's what it does. That's all it is. It's here's your free food, here's your discounted appliances. Shut the fuck up about everything you saw over there and try to be happy that your brain isn't more fucked up because the VA is going to fuck you over. And the whole idea of Veterans Day is just fucking awful. It's fucking awful, but we still have it because it's a bastardization of Armistice Day, and it was designed to get people riled up and, all gung-ho to join the military, so that they could then support the country and fight for freedom and blah, blah, and that they would then have a career where they were thanked for what they did and adulated nonstop once they got home. And the fact that you'll have a scarred brain, that's irrelevant. You should just join the service. Fuck Veterans Day. The only purpose of Veterans Day is to put a huge a tiny little bandage on the huge gaping wound of American foreign policy. And it really shows when they gloss over the details of every major conflict that's ever been there and just say support the troops because it's Veterans Day. And then the rest of the year, they occupy some of the most homeless, most mistreated, most fucked up categories of people. And some of them have brain injuries, so nobody even listens to what they say when they do talk about how fucked up it was. The whole thing is a big middle finger to rationality, reason, empathy, and justice. Fuck Veterans Day.
I think there's a higher percentage in prisons as well.
Yeah.
Veterans relative to everyone else, but not necessarily a causal. It could just be correlative. I think in some ways it's possible that people more likely to join the military might be violent, aggressive tendencies. Anyway.
How dare you?
Hey, man. Dude, I made a lot of trips to recruiting office myself when I was in high school. So that's, that's where I was at 18.
Yeah, I made like 2.
Yeah, but I still kind of like, in some ways, the idea of shooting the bad guys, of being on Team Good, and being with all these other dudes that, we're close in age, we're together, we're a team, we're in danger to get together. There's a little bit of adrenaline rush. There's a ton of camaraderie and fun and enjoyment of one another, and yet this seriousness, this weight of importance, like what we're doing really matters and will really make a positive difference in the world, and we are the ones saving the world from evil men and keeping people at home safe and free to live their lives without having to worry about getting killed by the bad guys, because we're taking care of them together. Like that propaganda strikes something like kind of deep. I don't know if it's like emotional inside me, like that connects with something that's already in my heart's desire to do, in a sense.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's ingrained as a man, if it's my personality type, if it's all the other propaganda I received growing up, that's a desire, but it definitely connects with something that's good inside me, and that's
it's definitely
I'm a fighter
evolutionary.
in some ways. Yeah. So I get it. I get why people would sign up to do it, because I wanted to. If all the lies they told me were true, then signing up would have been a great thing.
But I still want to do that. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I still want to do that, and I still want to do all of the things that you just said I just know I can't get it in the public sector. I have to, go find a militia, and then I'll actually be doing that sort of thing. That is, if the militia is, true to its purpose. But
Yeah.
you know,
The tragedy is most of the militias, it seems like that you're gonna find are highly patriotic flag
right?
wavers, veteran defenders type people that
Stomp my flag, I'll stomp your ass.
yeah, just this dumbass statement. Oh, not my cloth. Please
Yeah, I
no.
just but that's why I like Sonic, because it makes the point very clearly that you can't trust
Did not
official
think it was going
sources.
there. That's why you
You
like
know,
Sonic?
yeah, it's about an anti-government, pro-fun set of ragtag individuals who go off and destroy the evil empire every time it crops up. It's like whack-a-mole for anarchists. It's fantastic on that level. But you know,
I
beyond all of that, like, if you want to talk propaganda, that's the kind of propaganda I like. That's the reason I like The Matrix. That's the reason The Fugitive still sticks with me, because I know for a fact, and I've known it since I was like 7, that I can't get this sort of thing from official sources. It's why I only went to recruiters' offices like twice, and I was filled with this disgust every time I did. It was awful, because I knew that I was going in there and that I was going to be fed a bunch of lies about what was going to happen. And also, I was sort of like, during the time when that was starting to happen, when my family started to want me to join up, I was trying to pay penance for, this bullshit political philosophy that I had had in high school. And that bullshit political philosophy was that Bush did nothing wrong. We should glass Iran to kill all the ragheads. And that after we get done with all of that, we'll have freedom here at home, because 9/11, and we need to never forget and fight for those civilians. And I felt like a fucking idiot when I realized how wrong all of that was and how right all my liberal friends were. And so I was sort of still paying penance. And the idea of fighting alongside these people after doing everything they told me to and cutting my hair was fucking awful. And so I'm obviously not a veteran, but that doesn't mean that I don't have the mindset that a lot of them had before they joined up. And I just feel really fucking aching sorrow every time I think about the people I know who have joined up, because there's something stripped out of them now. They're less of who they were and more somebody else, and they're more like every other person that's ever joined up, and less like the person that they were. And that is fucking awful. And so, I mean, that combined with the fact that they get a big middle finger and Veterans Day, the band-aid of band-aids, when they get back, just it's fucking awful. And it makes me really want to get those Chaos Emeralds and kill all the governments.
Yeah, you at the front of that, you had probably the most in-depth analysis of Sonic the Hedgehog I've ever heard. Which
I
I
could
haven't
go
heard
much
many,
deeper.
except I'm sure you can. I'm sure that rabbit hole goes deep. And he runs fast and jumps high,
Yes.
flex rings, and Chaos Emeralds.
Yes. Because
Um,
if you don't collect the Chaos Emeralds, you can't actually beat the game.
okay. Yeah, veterans, like I'm really grateful for all the veterans out there who do speak out against Veterans Day and against honoring veterans.
Adam
Not
Kokesh.
because it's not. Yep. I mean we know a bunch of them in our circles. Feel like, but it's so everyone's voice is valid on this. You don't need to be a veteran to understand that it's bullshit dumbassery the U.S. foreign policy is, and you don't need to be a veteran to see what a manipulative act of propaganda things like Veterans Day are, and you don't need to be a, a veteran to understand that honoring people for fighting for an organization that exists through aggressive violence on peaceful people is a horrible reason, an evil reason to honor people. But
Yeah, well,
it's nice
and
when
even
veterans.
even just joining an organization you don't fully understand. I mean, you're just following orders. You're just doing what you're told. You're just doing your job. You don't fully fucking understand anything about it. You don't even understand 60% of it. You probably don't even understand the literal half of it. And we're supposed to honor you for supporting it. Fuck that.
Yeah, exactly. I like when veterans specifically though say it, even though other views are valid and rational, because it often exposes people for what they really are. Because veterans get a ton of crap for by
Yeah.
people out on this evil. They get a ton of crap from the people that claim to be so thankful for these veterans serving and to think they're all a bunch of heroes. But when they
Yeah.
start heavily criticizing these veterans, mocking them, calling them names and stuff, it shows us what they're like as people. That really who they're worshiping is who they're praising is the state, really, and the state and those loyal to it.
Right.
It's
I mean,
it has
and
nothing to do with whether or not people serve, but it's like, do you maintain the same worldview I do about how great our government is and how free we are?
yeah, well, and I mean, first off, that's a really good way to say that they only like the troops that confirm their bias, because
Yep.
confirmation bias is the strongest, most reliable way to cow people into submission by making them think that they're not submitting. So there's that, and then there's also the idea, and this is my next shirt. I'm gonna say you can't serve two masters, and I'm gonna make it an anti-government shirt, pro-Christianity. But
Harding, man, the atheist just getting that Christian crowd.
of course,
Shameless
actually,
marketing.
I actually already have 6 Christians that I know physically in person interested in buying this shirt. So there's
Cool.
that too. But like, because I sort of figure that people can't block a shirt on Facebook, and if they see it in the store, the only thing that they can do is avert their eyes and get the thought crime out of their heads by cleansing it with patriotic slogans
Yes.
and songs. But
Yes, avert
beyond
their
that,
eyes and say two quick prayers in their heart, the Our Father
right?
and the Pledge of Allegiance.
Well, and see, that's the thing. That's what I was gonna say. Reza Aslan recently came out with a video, um, saying that people,
The lion?
what?
Nothing.
Oh, I didn't hear what you said, but I'm assuming it was amusing.
I wouldn't assume that. This is you should assume it was an attempt at amusement.
There you go.
Yes.
But he recently came out with a video that I thought was very good, where he said that people don't really worship God for the most part. They worship their idea of God. And if you go against their idea of God, the God that they've projected themselves onto, instead of the God of the actual religion or the God of whatever, um, if you go against what they've projected themselves onto, they will consider it a personal attack and defend themselves as though it were. And that's the same thing with government. It's the same exact idea. They don't want any government. They don't want a government that does things that they disagree with, even though they'll say that whatever, people voted it in. They want a government that does what they want, and when it does, they're completely satisfied. And when it doesn't, or when it seems like it's moving in the opposite direction, they're fucking not. And if you can say effectively to them that one of the key cornerstones of defense of their government, no matter what their government is, because the troops aren't changing just because it's a Republican or a Democrat in office, is doing unjust things using that mechanism, those troops, then it really feels like a personal attack, and that cognitive dissonance is scientifically proven to feel like a physical attack. It hurts the same parts of
Yeah.
the brain that are hurt when you're hurt, and in doing so, they've effectively made it so that saying the truth can feel like a lash of whips. And that's fucking that's if that's not a cult, if that's not a religion, I don't know what the fuck is. So when people say that they only follow one God and that God is, Allah, or Yahweh, or something like that, and or any of the number of Hindu gods, or
Right.
the bodhisattvas. Whenever they say they follow that, if they also follow a governmental structure, tell them they're wrong and that they should reanalyze their beliefs, because they're fucking hypocrites with big ass planks in their eyes, judging other people's goddamn specs.
Yeah, unless they're polytheists, then then it could make sense. Like, well, I worship multiple gods, including the state. But
Yeah.
one thing
Well,
one thing you said, which I mean, it's totally right. It just struck me as kind of humorous in light of people's responses. Is you said people are all for government when they do the things that they want government to do, and they're against government when government doesn't do what they want it to do, and that's what they're like in most of their everyday lives. But the minute you get those people talking with an anarchist who's confronting them on these ideas, they're pretty much just all pro government all the time. Like they end up using, especially the self-proclaimed conservatives, they end up using all of the Democrat progressive arguments for the state and for government intervention that they try to rebut in other conversations that that they have. Like it's amazing how pro government people become, who in many ways are anti-government depending upon who's in office in their
yeah.
normal everyday lives. But the truth and people who present the truth clearly, which which I believe is that the anarchist worldview is the most ethical one in terms of politics, has a way of just the drawing out the worst in people, or drawing out all their deceptive beliefs, I would say. It's they really
Well,
get exposed for who they are and the way that they think about the world.
right. And that's one of the things I wanted to sort of reflect off of, because you were saying you didn't know which one you were closer to, a Republican or a Democrat. And I would argue that anybody who's authentically anarchistic can't say that they're closer to one or the other, because do you want a republic?
Yeah, yeah, I don't mean like the specific sort of definitions of the word, just kind of what Republicans are like and what Democrats are like.
Well, yes, but
So,
then that exposes republicanism and democracy as cargo cults, doesn't it? Where
well,
if
yeah, that's
you're
exactly what that.
where if you believe in the strength of the republic, or if you believe in the openness of a democracy, then you must also believe in these other things, because if you don't, then you're a bad Republican or a bad Democrat. It's a fucking cargo cult. So I that's why I say I'm next to neither. I'm not
Right.
on the left or the right, even though I support like more free market principles. I also support the idea of a commune or a syndicate, or a green society. I don't have an isolated thing that has to be there, or it's not anarchy, and therefore, because of that, um, I'm not closer to either, because I don't see either as fundamentally separate. I see them as two sides of the same coin, because there's there's no fundamental difference between the effect of either. And so, because the rhetoric is similar, uh, it can seem different, but if the effects are so constantly uh, the same effects, then you can tell that it's because they're not working for you. They're not working for anybody. They're working for their own interests. And in that way, you can tell that anybody who says that they're more of a Republican or a Democrat is full of shit. And that because of that, they're listing towards the left or the right because it feels good, and not because they think it's wise.
Yeah, here's I think where my brain, is kind of coming from. I'm very close to Ron Paul ideologically, and he was a Republican candidate. So like that kind of just makes me, oh yeah, I'm closer to Republican in that way. Without obviously under rational analysis, I'm I'm off that spectrum. Yeah, the spectrum of Democrat to Republican, conservative to progressive. I'm simply not on it. I don't fit. All right, I when you were ranting, I checked my Google Calendar, and I do have a showing 25 minutes away at 6, and I've got a van of garbage to unload beforehand. So I've got to cut this conversation off. Thanks for joining us today, people. It's been good talking to you, Mr. Harding.
And you as well. And what is next week? There's something I do want to. Yeah, I want to discuss Thanksgiving before Thanksgiving.
Okay.
I think
Thanksgiving
I think
is the 30th. Nope, 23rd.
So I want to make. Yeah.
Right.
So I want to discuss that, and I want to discuss how liberals love to bring up the slaughter of the natives, but then they also don't like to bring up the fact that their policies have, well, leftists anyway, that their policies have led to a huge amount more exploitation of very disadvantaged people. So there's a lot to unpack about Thanksgiving, I'll say that, and we should definitely do that.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's one of those kind of funny binaries that people put themselves in. Are you pro-pilgrims or are you pro-Indians? Like, are you anti-genocide or pro-genocide? When it turns out you can just be for both. Like, you can be against all the bad things and for all the good things. It's possible to hold those two perspectives, but not if you're a staunch rightist or leftist.
Well, also, it's fucking hilarious. And, this is something I can elaborate on next week. But it's fucking hilarious because we have this paradigm based on the myth of the noble savage. And this paradigm says that if you're pro-Native American, you're anti-genocide. And they forget that so many of the natives were genociding each other. And so many of the white people were against the entire idea of westward expansion. Yeah. And it wasn't just like, hey, these are your predetermined sides. You're fucked if you're not on one.
There's nothing neat about that. And the biggest tragedy of it, or at least perhaps the biggest tragedy, was the unintended consequence of disease that the Native American population didn't have. Like, that amount of destruction was just this accidental, horrible event that is horrifically sad in history for all those people, but also not their fault. And it's the fault of the people that came over, but that's so unintentional and unable to have any idea that such a thing would occur. Anyway, let's go. We'll talk about Thanksgiving next week. There's some interesting stories out there and some interesting articles we can point people to that I think we're both aware of. Thanks again for joining us today. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at JeremiahJM. Harding, want to plug anything? You got shirts.
I'm Insanity is free. I got shirts, yo. I got the moment of rage, nigga. I got the best shit.
All right. Tune in next week when we change up our vernacular. All right, peace, y'all.